Hey everybody, it's Sunday, February 23rd, and this is Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the developer of Tinderbox. Michael Becker has a new version of his class coming up on next Friday, starting new cohort.
Cohort
So
number three, yeah, we've
go cohort 3.
yeah.
And without further delay, here's Michael Becker.
Hey everybody, welcome to I can't believe the last meetup of February. So typically what we do with the meetups is we go around the room and we have new people introduce themselves. We say hi to people we haven't seen in a while. Hey Detlef, haven't seen you in ages. Um, we then dig into any topics, issues that people are working on with Tinderbox tool or just tools for thought in general. And if we have a theme, we jump right into that theme. So happens we actually do have a theme today. It brings together my 3 favorite topics in the world and possibly 4, and pulls them all together for a really big discussion. We'll kick into that in just a minute. For next week, though, just so we're all hearing, Chuck Wade is going to be running. He'll be the guest speaker for next week, March 1st meetup, going through his strategy for creating diagrams in Tinderbox. So Chuck, thank you very much for that for next week. But let's kick off to does anybody, before we kick off into our theme for today, does anybody have any burning topics, questions, Tinderbox items that they want to get taken care of first before we dig into our guest speaker? Okay. Mark, before we kick in, just so we get it on recording, you want to kind of summarize our math problem on Tinderbox? I thought that was really useful. Let's do that again.
Sure, there was a very interesting post overnight on the Tinderbox forum of a fairly straightforward mathematical computation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, that looked like it had no syntax error, and but reported the wrong result. And we saw fairly quickly that the poster was using German commas for the decimal separator, where most or just about all programming languages require the use of the uh, Anglo-American period for the decimal separator. So that was straightforward. And I thought a little bit about why it's actually hard in programming languages to accommodate localization like commas for decimal separators. Uh, but it still wasn't coming up with the right answer. And it turns out this was because instead of the hyphen for the minus sign, uh, the poster had an en dash, probably copied from something in a publication where an en dash for subtraction does no harm. Uh, so that's an interesting example of a situation where things look absolutely as they should, but are not absolutely as they should.
I'll give you a similar one I had on that in that I was trying to pass emojis through a variable, and Mark helped me realize that, and I figured out the problem. I stopped passing emojis and I used their HTML entity instead. And Mark let me know that you're passing a 4-bit emoji through the system kind of munges things up. I don't have the technical reason for understanding for it, but it's that same kind of point. You think, well, it should be so obvious just to pass that character, and it's not sometimes. All right, so let's kick. Anybody else have any comments, questions, or before we kick off into our theme? Okay, so let me introduce the theme briefly. So there's kind of 3 big things going on in the world. There's this idea of personal knowledge management and tools for thought that we have going on. We'll summarizing. Another big piece is this whole idea of how do we own and control and have agency over all of this personal data that we're creating. And that's big global mandate around the world on what we call self-sovereign identity, which has added new layers to the internet, such as decentralized identifiers and verified credentials that allow us to cryptographically control and own that data. And then we all been talking about this massive push of AI, and particularly personal AI. And so I had been, and we've all been kind of playing around and looking through how do we curate these personal AIs. And I met a few weeks ago Yngvi Karlson, co-founder out of Copenhagen of the company Kin, which is one of the leading personal AIs around the world. And he and I started talking about, wouldn't it be great if we could take a tool like Tinderbox, open up an API into a tool like Kin, and be feeding this all of our personal data and training this AI to represent us and represent our agency. So as a kind of a global leader and innovative founder of the intersection of personal data with self-sovereign agency and control over our data and personal AI, I'd like to hand over the discussion you give me and have us, give us your background and talk to us about the intersection of those three things.
Yes, thank you. Before we get a little bit in here, I have my co-founder and Simon with me as well, and our colleague Volodya is in the crowd here as well. I'm super curious to hear how many in the room have experience with self-sovereign identity. Everybody have some kind of an idea of it, right? Yeah. Nothing
No,
at all.
very few, very few.
Very few. Okay, then I'll actually say before I start, I think I'll then you're all very technical. That's correct, right?
No, I would say the full spectrum, everyone from like really
Oh,
hardcore engineers to humanities people who are using text for exploratory analysis.
okay. Well, that's great. Then we'll start it. So I'm just considering now throwing the ball over to Volodya in here just to explain self-sovereign identity very quickly. Can you do that just for like 2 minutes?
In 2 minutes is hard. I could talk for hours. But self-sovereign identity, it's more the architecture principle, right? That it's actually 6 principles that talk about, that the data ownership is the center. So we building the user-centric systems where user have the full control on his data, and we never could take the access out from the user. A user always give the consent if somebody wants to do something with his data. And it's more about the interoperability and portability and persistence, so that we could reuse this data in a different context. And it's mainly it. So it's how we see the future of the data products, right? So that data is always stay in your hands, and you have the protection over the power of other companies because you act directly on behalf of yourself. So you don't need any kind of intermediate systems to do any kind of operations with your data on behalf of you. And it's actually the self-sovereign identity, it's missed identity and permission layer for the internet, because when internet was created, we simply missed this topic, right? That's why the internet is globally broken in terms of identity and access control. So in the internet, you don't know with whom you talk, and you don't know where the data came from. And actually the self-sovereign identity try to, globally fix this problem. So it's, if you're talking in short.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yep.
if I can interject on that a little bit, what's really interesting about this is, and put it more into and when we talk about identity, remember identity is just a proxy of our personal data and our behavioral attributes. And as I think about our using a tool like Tinderbox is kind of a IDE for our ability to be able to train these AIs, to be able to train our data, to understand all of those attributes about our notes, our thoughts, our ideas, and then feeding those up into the marketplace. And just so we understand the importance of this global movement that's happening, and I encourage you all to do research on it. Within the next Gartner's predicting within the next 18 months or so, by the end of 2026, there'll be over 600 billion people on the planet with one of these personal, not 600 billion, 600 million people on the planet with these personal identity wallets controlling their data and controlling their information and leveraging these AI agents that are representing them to the market. So that's really the whole point of today's conversation, to figure out how. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have the huge initiative in Europe, the European wallet. So actually is the SSI wallet that every citizen will have. But I'm talking for ages that the wallets are not enough anymore. So we need something active that could stay online, represent yourself, and maybe handle some requests. That's why we're talking more and more about the agents. And the future is agentic, and the agentic future work quite well with the artificial intelligence and SSI. So it's two different kind of agents, but they could be merged and empowered together. It's quite interesting concept.
And in this context, and that's why we're having today's conversation, agents means personal AI, right? That representative of you, the individual, to the market and to yourself. But again, please go ahead.
Yes. So there is so basically, yeah, self-sovereign identity is about you controlling your own data, and as you mentioned in the beginning, Michael, with verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers, if you have the ability to prove something without sharing your data, that opens up for a world of opportunities that we can only imagine and by now hope to experience. And I'll get a little bit into that actually. But the world, there's a overall challenge with this self-sovereign identity term, and it is that it's extremely confusing for everyday people to understand it. So even if you have a conversation over an hour or two where you get people super hyped up about the possibility of the future with self-sovereign identity, then they will leave with more questions than they came in with, and they will often forget, not be able to tell it to somebody else. So there is a challenge there, and to tackle on the word sovereignty. Like we know this from sovereign nations, and so what is sovereignty? And sovereignty is basically just borders. And how can you then have a digital border of your data? And that's kind of what we want to tackle. And so that the word sovereignty here is that you control it. And then the word identity is a different interesting word in this as well. Because what is identity? You can have identifiers, government identifiers, and so on and so on. But, and we'll get into this as well, identity from our perspective is your memory, because without your memory, your identity is of no use. So I think I would prefer, I'll put on some, I'll share my screen a bit because I'll have some talking points and I'll show a demo of Kin. I think that will help the conversation here. Okay, if I can share you here. Can everybody see my screen here?
Yep.
All right, great. So before I get started, a quick intro to myself here as well. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. Kin is the seventh company I'm working on, and I'm co-founder of Kin. I've exited 2 businesses previously, and I've been a venture capitalist for 5 years as well. The reason I think, so I was a venture capitalist for the past 5 years before starting Kin, and I was not sure that I was going to start another business. And the reason I had to and leave the VC world behind was because this is an extremely important problem to solve. So I completely fell in love with the self-sovereign identity, and well, you'll see what you'll see what we're building here, and I think you'll get why. So Kin is a personal AI companion, and we aim it to be the most trusted AI in the world, especially for you understanding others. So we did talk a little bit about here with the SSI, self-sovereign identity and data ownership. And the big problem with this is that currently it's big tech that claims ownership of your data. They make billions from it. And what we get in return is very beautiful targeted ads. So one of the big questions are, can we even own or control our data? Absolutely. That's actually not the problem. Can we benefit from our data? That's a different question that we find more interesting. And the answer to that is right now, not really, but a little bit. And this is where kin comes in. But why can't we benefit from our own data? And the reason for that is that there is no real market for you and I to sell our data to the marketplace or to big tech and get any value from it. So in order for such a market to exist, we would need millions and millions of people to control their data. And only when we have millions of people having control over their data and having that up to date, then businesses would be forced to recognize it, and they would have an incentive to provide services for your data that is in your control without you handing over that data. So that means we don't have a tech problem, we have an adoption problem on our hands when it comes to self-sovereign identity. This has taken us years to acknowledge, because when we started out, we completely fell in love with the blockchain world, the Web3 world, and then the Web5 world, where own your data and the self-sovereign identity. We completely fell in love, but we realized and experienced firsthand that it is impossible to sell the idea of self-sovereign identity to consumers. They just have no idea. That it sounds cool, but they don't know what to do about it from there. And they'll go on, log into their Instagram account or whatever they use and go on with their day. So this exciting problem of self-sovereign identity and data ownership that we kind of wanted to address with Kin in the beginning, of how can you own your own data and how can we make that data valuable for you? We had to do more than just the SSI part and data ownership part, because with no incentive for users or businesses for this true user-owned data structure, then this will never be enough. And well, all your data is already locked up by big tech, so we kind of need to build something new. So it's very difficult to do. So we have to layer on other challenges as well to tackle this adoption problem of self-sovereign identity. And that was actually perfect, because there are other things in that is very valuable for us. The reason we love data ownership, that comes from a philosophical point of perspective, from reading Austrian economics 15 years ago, and the right to private property, stuff that we think that are fundamental human rights. And then being in a world where you just see that, like when you grow up, you notice that somebody is taking all my stuff and doing with it what they want, and I can't really do anything about it. And so the digital realm doesn't really believe in the same fundamental rights you have when you're offline, that you can actually own something. So that was the initial motivation, and then firsthand we noticed some other things. We noticed that, well, we noticed that from both from family members and from ourselves that, okay, there's a new generation growing up here, and they're not very happy about themselves. We have a rising anxiety and loneliness. And when you talk to people from a younger generation, probably, the Gen Z generation, but also a little bit millennials, you'll see that okay, you have a rise in anxiety and loneliness, and they really need a trusted, safe space. Okay, so there's something interesting here where that big tech just cannot really tackle in the same way because of compliance issues. So if Google were to, or Meta were to tackle the mental health side of in their products, that will be a compliance nightmare for them. So we thought, okay, maybe we can go in and tackle, focus on your soft data instead of your hard data. And I'm sure both Volodya and Simon can talk about that a lot. Extremely interesting topic, soft data versus hard data. So we said, okay, let's go into that. Your soft data, your thoughts with ownership. But that wasn't enough either, because there are already AI companions out there focusing on loneliness. And what we've learned from them is that they struggle to make a business, like a profitable business. And we also need to do that in order to grow as well. So we looked into one more challenge that we've layered on top, and that is the need for human connections. Because not only is there a mental health crisis, but we also see that, like my younger sister, sometimes you struggle with just knowing how to address a conflict, how to go over and tell your coworker something, or simple things that that is completely natural for you, might be very difficult for people who have been who just been growing up in front of a computer. So how can we help people have more authentic interactions and live more authentic lives instead of having AIs replacing them? So this is really the Venn diagram that shows what we're trying to tackle with Kin. So I'll move a little bit on here. Okay, let me see. Yeah, I'll just skip a slide here. So all in all, the problem that we have here is that we want to go into the emotional side of human lives and use AI for that, and not only on the productivity side of it. There's plenty of productivity tools out there, and you can also use Kin for productivity stuff, but the unique side of it is the self-care stuff and the emotional side of things. All right. Here's just one. I brought just one quote here to show. We have a lot of uses for in Kin, and what we really noticed here, because we're looking a little bit also into what is not our product market fit only, but what is the language model fit that the users we are targeting are using. What words are they using? And this came in the other day that I really loved it. There was this one user, Emily, just saying that I felt so much relief after talking to an AI that understood me. And I'll show you Kin here in a second. So our our go-to-market on the self-sovereign identity and data ownership side and tackle the adoption phase is Kin. And yeah, you see it here, that we're going to target an audience. We're targeting an audience that have an emotional overload in some sense. And with Kin, we can guide them. And after Kin, hopefully they are more empowered and have more confidence in their lives. They know what to say, how to interact, and they bring their best to the table every day when they go to work. And when we promote Kin in the world, we don't talk about verifiable credentials. We don't talk about decentralized identifier. We don't talk about zero knowledge proof or all these things, or self-sovereign identity. We try not to talk about that. We want it to be as relatable as possible. And that can be difficult when you fall in love with the technology behind it. So let me show you a demo of it. I'll just get some water here. Just 1 second.
And when you're going through the demo, can you make sure too that you also kind of lace in how my data will be feeding into training this AI? So I'm essentially training my own model through my interactions with it. And then that's really the whole goal for what I'm hoping for is how do we get our Tinderbox tools, our Obsidian tools, our tools for thought feeding into and training our AI someday. So if you can talk about that.
And I think the interesting part of that is really in the technology. As Volodymyr said in the beginning, if you have data that you control that is interoperable and portable, then, well, you can plug it in wherever you want. So if we can open up for you to plug your data into Kin, and then you can plug Kin into somewhere else, that is just brilliant. Where we are right, I'll show you where we are. So where we start here in the beginning, where we have to start in the beginning, is you talking to Kin, and everything you say to Kin stays between you and Kin. There's nobody on our team that can get access to your data. Even if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't access your data. And then we've built some integrations as well. One of them are live in our app, and then eventually the API is more. We're going to get there, and Simon can talk more about that in just a second.
Well, and on that point too, I'm going to interrupt if you don't mind too. You're also building a desktop app at some point too that will then natively work with the relative OSs. And we have previous meetups where Mark Bernstein had espoused the idea of working natively on the machine, because then your data is on the machine and it's local within your own, call it your own personal cloud or your personal data store in that context, which Tinderbox could actually help be the remote control of, is really the thing.
Yeah, I think one of the unique things with Kin as an application is that it is designed to handle data that is stored locally on your device. And yeah, we are working on desktop as well. The first problem we're solving here is how can we synchronize data from your phone to your desktop in a safe way so that, well, nobody touches it in the process. So yeah, and I know Volodymyr in here is working a lot on that as well. But let me just show you the demo here. There's a small recording for. So let me see. I want to make sure I can pause and play here. Okay. So when you get started with Kin, what we try to do, we want to make it as simple to use for everyday people as possible. You get met by a chat interface, and our goal with this is to establish an emotional connection between you and Kin, because that is important, an important foundation for trust going forward. So Kin will try to get to know you, ask you a question, and introduce itself, tell you, okay, everything you say to Kin is private and stored on your device, and we cannot access it. Fair enough. So here's a good example. Straight away, when you start using Kin and you tell Kin something, the second Kin connects memory, like learns something about you, it will show you that it has a memory. And I'll show you the knowledge graph in a second. All right. Before I show you the knowledge graph, what we try to do here, because it is at the adoption phase and that we're trying to really solve. And the entire space of AI companions is also a new space. So we also want to learn a little bit. So here we try to survey you to say, okay, what is it that you want to use Kin for? And this can help us develop our product. So, okay, we're going to ask you where you want to start. Okay. And this is the only time we do that. And now you are ready to go on with your Kin. So let me show you here the memory. Okay. So here from the beginning, just by me setting up a new Kin, my name is Jessica. I work at Spark, and I work
your screen at the moment.
What?
We don't see your screen.
You can't see my screen, really?
I see it.
I see the screen.
Yeah, I see
Okay.
it.
You've
quite
got
well.
a phone up there.
Okay. Okay. So there's only one. Okay. Then it's not my side. So I hope you can. Okay. If the others can see, I'll try to continue. Here you can see the knowledge graph that is there. And one thing that's quite unique with what we do with Kin that you won't see with ChatGPT or something like that. first and foremost, they won't have a memory like this in a knowledge graph. What the type of memory ChatGPT and the others have, I think Simon can explain that in a second. But we make it possible for you to edit your memories. So instead of here, I said branding and marketing, maybe I wanted to change that to branding and content marketing. Okay, and you can see that Kin's knowledge of you is now changed. So you can say something and then kind of regret it afterwards, which is kind of unique when it comes to AI. All right, so here you can see a knowledge graph of Jessica's. That here I cheated a bit, so the first thing you saw was the onboarding, but over time you'll see that it just becomes more and more and more. You would know this from Obsidian, this kind of structure. All right. And I can click in on any node. So here I click in on Simon. You can see the interactions that Jessica has with Simon. Jessica improved management skills through mentorship of Simon, and so on and so on. And this is really Kin getting to know Jessica. Of course, it's a consumer AI, so you can personalize it as you want, give it a tone of voice. You can search the web. Here is a good example on how you can choose what speech-to-text model you want to use. I want to stop here for a second, because one of the big things when it comes to self-sovereign identity is the topic on privacy. It is not really about privacy as it is about you being in control. So user control data is important. And if you want to have a model where you share your data somewhere, well, like that's up to you. But if we can make it possible for you, okay, you have all your data on device, and here you have a speech-to-text model that can be on your device. You can take a Whisper Tiny, and it runs on your device. Fair enough. Or you can select, as I did here, Azure Transcribe, and it uses Azure's cloud service. So that it's about giving you the option to choose what you want. Okay. Here I'll show you one way to use Kin. Okay, because and some integrations we have here. So what is my schedule for Friday? And you'll see here, Kin will come up and show that, all right. There's a birthday, there's a one-on-one meeting. So Kin will now look into my calendar and see, okay, these are the things you have. And you also have some reminders set on. And I'll ask Kin here, remind me to prepare for my one-on-one tomorrow at 7 a.m. The one-on-one is with Simon. Okay, and then Kin in the conversation generates a reminder for you, and you can accept it or you can edit it and then move on with your day. Okay, so here I asked Kin to say to give me something I can reflect on. Okay, just to show you that you can also bookmark a message so you can return to it later. It's something that I found very valuable working with AIs in general. Okay, so that was the bookmarks. And let me see if this concludes it. Oh yeah, a final thing to show here is we have an inspiration section. So whatever you want to, if you want to talk to Kin about something specific, you can. We've made some designed topics. And then I think finally I will show you. Yeah, the journaling. So one thing we added in that was highly requested from users was a journaling feature. And one thing is that you can talk to a journal. So we added voice mode, voice features, and write your own journal entry. That's all good. And you can see here in the top here that Kin gives you a personalized suggestion for a topic. And then when you see when you submit your journal entry, then you have the ability to talk to Kin about that journal entry. So you can reflect on your journaling. And I think that's that a lot of users have had that be very beneficial. All right, so that was a short demo of a Kin from a user perspective. And from here, we'll go a little bit more technical, and I'll throw the ball over to Simon, if you are still here.
Yes.
Yes,
Absolutely.
you can take over the shared screen.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And there's already a lot of great questions.
Oh, nice.
Uh, da, da, da. Okay, so I thought I would just tell a little bit about the journey and that we've been through from a tech perspective. But we don't have to go that deep into it. I think there's some great discussions waiting already in the chat. So let's focus a lot on that as well. Yeah, just interrupt if you have anything you want to know specifically. Cool. So first, let's take a little step back. I just want to speak a little bit about how to navigate this rapidly changing tech environment that we're seeing, especially over the last few years. Our approach have been to try to establish a solid foundation of what do we believe in, what is the future that we want to see, understand like the technology landscape deeply, try to identify what are the trends that we're seeing in the market, and then identifying or setting some architectural foundation and engineering principles that guides us. So our principles are that the user's privacy is our top priority. The user must at all times be able to use Kin completely privately. Our users' data is theirs and must at all times be available to them. We want our users to continually enrich their Kin memory. That's how Kin grows in value, and that needs to be enabled at all times. And we want users to have the best possible actionable output. That's how we kind of value if Kin is doing what it should. And we don't want to compromise on convenience. So especially when building a consumer app, people have very high expectations for your product. And we are bringing in some new and interesting and also challenging technologies that sometimes can contradict this. So it's about finding a balance where we can still provide a great product. You mentioned this Kin manifesto that we did some time ago, speaks into what you presented in the beginning, Michael. I think by 2030, I think this was Bill Gates that said this, everyone will have a personal AI. And it's going to become the most valuable digital asset that everyone will have. And that's why I believe it cannot be kept in the walled gardens of big tech or governments. It must transcend these ecosystems and must ultimately be owned and controlled by the user. That's the future that we believe in and that we want to see. So quickly kind of about this tech journey we've been on. As Yngvi mentioned, we started, several of us from the blockchain Web3 worlds, getting into zero knowledge proofs, NFTs, and so on. And quickly fell in love with the self-sovereign identity space and World Wide Web Consortium some years ago now, for the first time in, I think, 10, 11 years, introduced new standards on the internet, decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials. For someone that's grown up with the internet, that was super exciting to see that we're starting to see kind of new ways to use and interact with the internet. Then we dove really deep into personal data stores. So if you want to store your own data, how do you do that? There's different solutions out there. There's a kind of ceramic lid protocol, blockchain, IPFS-based solutions. And you have Berners-Lee's solid pods. And you had decentralized web nodes. That was the thing coming out of Block or kind of Jack Dorsey's Twitter's labs.
Hey, Simon, if I can pause you real quick. So on that note, I put it in the chat, but my doctoral dissertation is on the consumer adoption of personal information management systems, aka digital wallets, aka personal data stores. And in the appendix A and B, I'm just kind of letting people know I've Appendix A maps all of the terminology from 1890 to 2024 that we've used to manage personal data in this context. And Appendix B gives the top 64 initiatives that are making personal data and identity possible, like solid pods and things like that. So if people want that reference, that's the most current reference that I know of available right now. Okay,
That's super cool. I'm going to check that out myself. Unfortunately, what we found when looking at the solid pods, for example, is that it was dying out. It was not being maintained. There was a lot of traction behind decentralized web nodes. This kind of whole Web 5 coming out of a company called TPD. But unfortunately, and we were part of trying to make that happen, but unfortunately, that effort also shut down like half a year ago. So we are lacking some solution in this space for sure. Then we went in to understand LLMs. What are the different techniques? How do we work with agents and long-term memory? We explored encryption in use. So I think all of you know, but when we're talking about encryption and data, there's three main challenges, right? There's encryption at rest when the data is sitting on a disk or in a database. How to keep it safe? That is a problem that is solved. You have encryption in transit. That's also a problem that is solved with TLS and other security standards. And then you have encryption when the data is actually being used, being computed on, which is a bigger challenge. And there are several different solutions here. What we really dove into was trusted execution environments. Homomorphic encryption is also slowly getting there, but specifically when it comes to LLMs, where you need not only CPU, but primarily GPU processing power. Trusted execution environments is still like a very new thing. It's available on NVIDIA's like H100s, but it's still not being used in a lot of places. So it's very early days, but it is coming, and it's coming very soon, and we're hoping to use that. And then we ended up with the whole local first movement and architecture. So that means storing the data on the user's device. For us, that's on the phone. So embedded databases, figuring out how do we synchronize data between devices and keep the data private and encrypted. How do we run machine learning models on the device? Which models are actually feasible to run today versus what will we see in the future? And how powerful are these small language models, and what can we use them for? So that's kind of a journey we've been on, and it took a lot of time to understand all these technologies, and it was a very technology-led company when we started out, but we choose to see it as time wisely spent, and we now understand a lot about the different aspects of user-controlled data and this whole world of AI's encryption, and how you actually combine all these things together in a product that is feasible to build in 2025. These are some of the kind of shorter midterm trends that we identified. Briefly go through them. You probably know them already. Devices are increasingly capable to run machine learning models. They all have NPUs now, or Apple's neural engine, et cetera, et cetera. The models are also becoming smaller and better. So it's just a matter of time before we can run very, very powerful models on your device. We have the wallet adoption and private public key solutions that are also growing in adoption and in better user experience. We have this whole movement of local first and sync engine setup that has also been popularized by many apps Obsidian, one of them, Linear, Superhuman, many different very popular apps today.
Hey, Simon, let me
we have
interject on that one real quick. Another one that just popped in my mind is, and I'll put it in the chat. There's a company called Sapien that is deploying a personal data store SDK with your own little agent, particularly trained for loyalty and retail. So the idea is, and they're going initially after the grocery store market. So the idea is, grocery stores will build a personal data store gateway essentially into the loyalty app, so that my app, my experience is like my tools like Kin, my tools like Tinderbox feed my interests and behaviors, or my Apple behaviors into my personal data store sitting within my phone that's communicating with the loyalty program. So in that way, the loyalty program's data goes to the algorithm goes to the data rather than the data going to the algorithm. So when the algorithm says, what are you interested? What's your DMA? How old are you? Rather than giving your birth date, you just say, yes, I'm over 21. And it's that kind of layered interchange that I think tools like Kin will do. So Kin's doing right now for like the personal and mental health model that Sapien is doing for loyalty and retail. So kind of interesting how this is all evolving.
Super interesting. And where's the data going to end up? Is it going to be in 50 different data stores, or how's that going to look? We don't know. But yeah, it's that mechanism is very interesting.
On that point, and I put it up higher in the chat, that's where the ARIA Foundation and the likes of Decentralized Identity Foundation and others are coming together to try to create that interoperability between the ecosystems of ecosystems. And the answer is, my answer is, as per my doctoral dissertation, it's like bank accounts. We're going to have 3 or 4, 5 personal data stores personally, but you're also going to have one in the government. The next generation smart cards are also we'll be putting them in the car. So all of your data coming up off the car will feed through your data store, and that will be another source that will feed into all of this. So really interesting, fascinating stuff happening on this front.
Maybe just, if I have one comment on that, and that's why I mentioned in the beginning that it's not a tech problem, because we also, the first thing we did before doing Kin, we called it Hyphen, was this identity wallet where you could store your own data and you could connect. Let's say you connected your running app to this wallet, and then it would get all your running data, and you could plug it in somewhere, and then you could get personalized experiences without sharing your data. The challenge is really, how do you get consumers adopting these wallets and these personal data storages, and at the same time keeping them up to date, so that when they use them, that they are actually valuable for businesses to cater to them. And businesses won't cater to them before they have a high enough incentive. So as I said also in the beginning, that what our approach, at least, if we can get users to adopt a wallet early on and a personal data storage early on, and engaging with it almost every day, and have tens of millions of people doing that, then it opens up for the possibility to get businesses to change their business models. So then don't rely on storing your data. Welcome. That was just a comment on that. Simon, you can.
Good comments. Let's not spend that much more time here. I can go a little bit more into the whole memory side of knowledge graphs and so on in a second. Just want to highlight that, like, this combination of, if you don't know about kind of the local first ideals, definitely read up on it. It is a movement that is really picking up speed now in the software world, and we believe a lot that this is going to change how software is built again. Let's say, I mean, before the cloud, everything was local first, right? All the software was running on your computer, and we need to get back to that point and use the cloud for what the cloud is good at, use the computer for what that is good at. So we're kind of marrying like these local first ideals with privacy by design, and like these ideas or principles really have many shared, like overlapping values with the SSI space, even though we might maybe not, at an SSI future yet when it comes to using, like actually using verifiable credentials and so on. So just a note on the why we are doing local first. There's many reasons for that. There's the whole privacy and user control, but there's also just being able to build a very good app that performs great. So one example is we can run like an vector embedding model locally on your iPhone that is just as good or better than OpenAI's hosted model, and the latency is like a 1/5, and it's stable, right? Because there's no network latency, there's no hiccups, there's no timeouts. It's just instant, and that allows us to do a lot of interesting things with embeddings and searches locally on your phone. Yeah, so some of the foundations here: local first, privacy by design, trying to use open standards and protocols as much as possible. This is always a balance, because we also have to stay pragmatic, and not all the standards are really ready for adoption yet. We do have to use cloud and third-party providers for something, because we cannot do everything local yet, or the models are simply not capable enough. We do have a big point in not storing user data in the cloud. We don't want this honeypot of a lot of user data sitting together just waiting to get hacked, as we see all the time. We want to have it local on device, and that's the safest place for the data to be. And then, of course, there are certain cases where we really want to learn a little bit more about how the users are using our app. So we do ask them sometimes to share part of their conversation or share something with us, but it's always an opt-in from the user. So this is high level how the architecture looks like. Right now we have one called kind of a client that is our app. It has all the business logic in kind of our kin core. It has local models, it has key management, authentication, has the data store. And then we're leveraging some cloud providers for the large LLMs, the very large language models that we're using. We hope to run those. So the partners we are partnering up with are companies like Fireworks.ai that have zero data retention policies, which means that they only use the data to serve the requests. When the request is served, there's no data kept on their servers. That's kind of the best you can get at the moment. But we are actually with some partnerships with some people that are employing trust execution environments for LLM inference, which is super interesting. And it's kind of the next step on like technically guaranteeing data privacy. And as I mentioned, one of the big challenges was local first. You get a lot of great benefits. Everything, all the data is local. There's no wrangling around with APIs and versioning and all this stuff, right? You just read and write directly from the database. As a developer, it's a heaven, and for the users, it's great as well, because everything happens more or less instantly. You do get some new challenges that we're not used to with kind of the cloud. For example, the biggest one is obviously that you have to synchronize the data around to different clients, and how to do that in a good way. And there is a lot of different solutions, but most of them use kind of a master client traditional setup, where you have a master that is in the cloud, and then you have the kind of slaves or the clients that sync whatever is on the master, but the master decides, right? That's the master state. we don't want to have that, because that requires, well, that means you need to have a master that we control and where we can actually see the data and so on. So here we have multiple masters, so multiple clients that need to be able to synchronize the data between each other, and they need to do it in a way where it's not possible for us to see what is being synchronized. So how you do that is that you have this more or less dumb synchronization server that can synchronize incremental delta changes around. These delta changes are encrypted with the private key of the user on the client. So the synchronization server cannot see what's inside these packages, but it can see, it can serve them around, and the other client can request, okay, is there any updates since I last requested updates? Yeah, these are the updates, and it can ship it around. So it's just a dumb synchronization server. It sounds easy, but it's actually incredibly challenging to build, and it really depends on your use case how you build it. So we are partnering together with a very cool company called Terso that are building a fork of SQLite called libSQL, and we have worked with them to introduce vector embeddings in their database, and are now working on introducing synchronization. So hopefully within a few months we'll have that sorted, and we can start to build on other clients, and of course the desktop, as you guys mentioned. But one thing that we also really want to do is build this cloud agent, so to say, that can run in the cloud. So you can have your kin running in the cloud, and you can expose an API, right? So maybe you want to talk to your kin on your Sonos, and that's possible because the Sonos could just be a light client, and the actual kind of client or business logic runs in a protected environment in the cloud, again, where it's probably running in a trusted execution environments where no one has access to it, and you have distributed a private key to it. That means it can read your data, and it can act on it, and it can synchronize the data back so you can have it available on your other clients. Let's wrap this up. So what did we learn? Choose your battles. There's a lot of new technology, and it's all exciting, but you can't be pioneers and innovators in everything. Choose where you want to focus your innovation. Don't fall in love with technology and visions. Again, it's easy to get blinded by all this amazing technology, but at the end of the day, we need to solve real user problems. That's what's important. Don't start with the tech, even though that's what we did. I think we look at our kind of first year as more like a research company where we're just exploring before we actually found out, what we wanted to do and what problems that we wanted to solve. And at that point, the company changed, 180 degrees, and everything was about solving user problems. But the difference was that we now had a really, really good background and understanding of the technology that we could implement to solve those problems. And then very importantly, like map out what's happening in the future. It can be extremely difficult, but try to understand what's going to happen over the next 1 to 5, 10 years. Figure out how you want to play into that future, and then forget all about it, reset your brain, and focus on, getting a product out there right now. Yes, that was a little bit about technology. Is there any question to that we should address?
Yeah, I mean, let's go back. So one question I have is, like, how do we go about connecting tools like Tinderbox to, is it as simple as just opening up the AI? And Frederick, if you don't mind chiming in with your questions on model ownership, control, portability, pricing. I think you had some really interesting ones in the chat.
I can start with the first one on how do you get data in. So as as Yngvi mentioned, we started out by focusing a lot on what we call soft data, which is the data that's in your head. We see that is the most valuable data if we can extract that, if we can categorize it in a good way, and that's why we, where we are, focusing our innovation efforts is building out this memory system. You saw the knowledge graph. That was kind of our first version, very simplistic semantic memory. Right now, we are building this new iteration of the system that is also built on a graph structure, but has multiple layers, semantic fact layer with entities, another layer on top, kind of a hypergraph that is events and episodes, and then a layer on top that is more these conjunctive representations or summaries of memories, like my summer holiday last year. Kind of like the human brain also groups memories into bigger chunks, and then there's the whole time component, which is extremely challenging, and we can get into that as well if that's something that's interesting to you. But we spend a lot of resources on extracting data in the right format into our database to make it easier for us to retrieve it when we need it.
Yeah, this
John,
is Frederick. I'd like to jump in if I can.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the business model, and I think Peter asked about that as well. And I guess the question I have is, there's a lot of value in the AI model that you build over time as a user. And the question I have is that owned by the user, or is that owned by kin? Obviously, if it were owned by kin, it would create lock-in and have financial benefits. But if it were owned by the user, then maybe it could be portable. I understand that there's different AI models and the weights might not transfer cleanly and all that, but I'm just wondering, have you thought about that, about who owns the model and can it be taken away, and what's the relationship of that to the user? Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, of course. Thanks. So we certainly believe that your data is yours. That's our whole foundation. So at all time you can export your data. I could actually.
Is that source data, or is that the model? That's where I'm getting confused.
That is so. We don't train we don't train a model right now on your data. So it's you probably heard about retrieval augmented generation. So where you take a base model and then you feed kind of structured data into it.
Oh, it's constrained
as
on
context.
The model. Okay, I see what you're doing.
So that's what we're doing. So we have a base model. We fine-tune that, but we fine-tune that to be let's say have the expression of kin and act as kin, and then we feed in data. So your data actually lives in a database, and I can actually show briefly here maybe.
So there's value for you in that base model that you retain, and having that be very good is very helpful to kin. I think I understand now. Okay, thank you.
Oh,
So there is so just want to say you can.
I'm sorry. Is this like a federated learning model where the models aren't sharing data, but they're sharing the learnings that they're giving each other, and that rolls up to building the broader kin brain?
Not yet. That's a very interesting model that we are thinking about right now. It's about it's based on the feedback that we get from users and our kind of idea of how kin should behave. But what we really believe in, and where the login also comes, because you're right, users that has a lot of data in kin, that does generate a login effect, and we do see that people with a lot of memory use the product more, and obviously there's a switching cost. But we want to provide value by giving you a great interface to your data, right? You should enjoy using kin and the benefits that you get from kin. Maybe we're looking at generating insights over time based on your data, and that's why you should subscribe to kin, not because we keep your data and you can never change to something else. Now, since like common data formats for these kind of things, it doesn't really exist. So actually switching to another product is of course a little bit, challenging, but we do give the users possibility to, download their data. They can explore it as the raw data in a like SQLite database. Like all the data that is used for kin is in that database, and you can do whatever you want, or in some more like easy usable formats like CSV or of the messages or something like that.
But and what constitutes your data in that context, though? Like the data, how about the generative data that the AI had produced for me that I did? Is it only the data that I submit to it, or is it the data that gets also generated by and about me and by and about my things?
All of it. So of course there's the raw like interactions with the AI, the messages back and forth and stuff like that. That is also yours to keep. But also all the, you could say, like derivatives that we generate from that. So when you send a message or we consume some data in another way, our memory system is like looking at data, extracting, entities and relationships and all these kind of things, building the graph, building the memory system. All that data is also yours to use if you want to. We just want to give the best interface and the best experience of using that data. That's why you should stay.
And the value of kin is also that you do all this integration, which would be very hard to do on your own.
Yes, and so that's that's kind of the next frontier that we're seeing. Of course, there's data integrations into kin. Right now we have some like simple ones like Calendar and Apple Health that we're working on. But at some point, like we're going to open up an API so you can consume other types of data. It's challenging because the data really needs to be ingested in many different ways. Calendar data very different from email data. And what do we even want to do? Like, okay, we can ingest email data, but what do you want out of it, right? Like, how should we analyze it? If you give a document to kin, should we just consume all that, the contents of the document, and try to map it into a knowledge graph? It probably doesn't make sense. Should we like summarize it? Is it more your opinion or your takes on what is in that document that is actually the interesting thing, and just knowing that the document exists and be able to reference it? So there's a lot of thoughts going into like, how do we ingest different types of data in? And then there's the other side of it, which is, how can we allow people to share the data and get benefit from that out in the world? And we really see this world, with tons of AI agents out there. And you want to get a personal experience, whether you go to, booking.com and you want to book something. What if you could share your preferences for, share something about where was your previous holidays, and you're like staying at small hotels, maybe you have Tolkien, all these kind of things. How can you share that with that agent? Or maybe you go to your psychiatrist once a week, and instead of spending the first half hour talking about what happened to you in the week beforehand, you just the psychiatrist just requests a summary of that from kin half an hour before, and they get a nice little summary of what was the most important thing that happened in the user's life, what topics did they discuss, etc., etc. And you were able to use the time in the best way. So there's all these avenues where sharing data from your kin can create a much better, much more efficient, and much more personalized experience on the internet. And we have all, some great elements that we can use from the SSI space with decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, zero knowledge groups, and so on. But really, what we find really very interesting about the AIs and the LLMs is that you have this possibility to do this like schema agnostic data share. So you might, go to a website and request like, okay, I want to know something about Simon's preference for shoes because now I'm booking shoes. Okay, it can request that in whatever format it wants, right? Maybe it wants to request it in some JSON format that is super easy to read out from the website, automated. My kin can share it in that format. Maybe the psychiatrist wanted in a plain text email. We can share it in that format. And that's what LLMs are actually really, really good at, right? Like it's like manipulating text into different formats.
And on that same
So
note,
we really see a world. Yeah.
and on that
Go
same
ahead.
note, if you think about the direction of where digital identity wallets are coming into, so the idea of a digital identity wallet initially is, you know, foundational identity providers like your government or say an Amazon or whomever will issue a verified digital identity credential that will get put into your identity wallet. You then can present that credential to anyone to assert claims. So, and I'll upload it. But for example, my doctoral dissertation, I'm pretty excited about it actually. My doctoral diploma actually has a verified credential identity key that you can use to look up to verify that I actually did graduate, and here is the date, and it's all put in a public ledger that is immutable. That I've gotten this degree. So it's not just about who I am, but it's also asserting credentials that I've achieved, or in the case of like Tinderbox uploading data into the system, the idea is as that data gets uploaded into a new kin, it gets wrapped with the provenance of the source of my having generated that from say a particular device or from my identity fingerprint. And so all of these pieces are coming together. So in the case of like travel, when you go to the airport, you get issued a plane ticket, you get issued your vaccination status, you have your passport, and you have any say signed travel documents for, like when I went to Bhutan, I had to last October to speak on these topics. I had to be given letters from the government that I was there for this purpose. So all of those kind of credentials would get wrapped up, put into your digital identity wallet, and then you can assert and present them at, you know, en masse at one point, all coming from different issuing parties. And again, I see in some ways, Tinderbox is a IDE environment for one's personal data store, for one's personal information management system, for one's digital identity wallet, being in control of the provenance and ownership of all of your data. So that's how I kind of see these pieces coming together down the road. I'm sorry for the preachy speech, but I'm getting pretty excited about this.
Yeah, no. Also, we're also extremely excited about seeing that future happen, and it's just amazing. I mean, now we're coming back to these new standards on the internet, but being able, like, imagine being able to go to Booking.com, and instead of logging in with your Google account, you just, you know, swipe on your identity wallet. It verifies, okay, so here's Bob. I can see, you know, this Bob by his public key. Let me request travel preferences from Bob, and then on your wallet, whether it might be kin or somewhere else, a pop-up just pops up, and it have, you know, checked its memory about you, and it's be like, I'm going to, you know, this is what I found about your travel preferences. Will you allow me to present that to Booking.com? You swipe yes. That will be signed with your private key, right? So they can now see that data actually came from that same identity that just, you know, logged in, and maybe they can also see the actual provenance of, you know, how did the user get that data into their wallet in the first hand, like with the verifiable credentials. And now you can have like direct interactions with other parties, right? Without having a Google or a Facebook or any third parties sitting in between, intermediating those exchanges. You have your data, your AI agent, your wallets, and you can share that directly with whoever you choose.
Right. And it's similar to that. There's another group called the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. And the idea of that group is to give tools, and Photoshop is already integrated with these tools. And there's some physical cameras that are doing that as well, so that you take a picture with this camera, the unique fingerprint off of the silicon on that camera signs the content, which gets tied to your personal data identity storage, which then rolls up every data packet you produce is signed and controlled by you. And that works not only for the individual, but also for organizations. And then there's the identity protections in that too. So if you, for example, have political example, a journalist is, say, in Gaza taking pictures, you want to know that picture is authentic and has come from someone that's authentic, but their identity actually is not disclosed because they could get killed. So those are the kinds of things that these models are working through as well.
We're amazing, and and much needed at a time where we're also seeing so much fake AI content, right? How are we going to verify the authenticity that, this is actually coming from the right sources and created by actually, actual human beings? So it's all kind of coming together at this moment.
Yeah, and in a way, again, I'll mention the adoption side again, because if we have 10 million people having their own like Tinderbox, you have your personal stores, you have 10 million people having that being up to date. I mean, all these things that we talk about that are so interesting technology-wise, like they can actually happen and people can actually use it. So I get it. It is just a super exciting area.
Yes, absolutely. Any more questions or comments or thoughts?
Well, I'll share one. Generally, if I'm going out to the internet to look for something, it's going to be beyond my knowledge base, unless I'm analyzing my own data. And I'll just pick an example. I want to go shopping on Amazon and buy shoes, right? So what I heard from you guys was, well, we'll prevent Facebook and all these other entities from gathering information. But even if I go through Kin, aren't I then just sharing information with Amazon, and Amazon knows what kind of sneakers I like or whatever, and they know my age and my address. I mean, that doesn't that issue of private data still exist even within Kin or no?
I think that the important part here is like data is not valuable if you're not able to share it. Like you can have all your data, all your thoughts, everything in your head or on your hard drive, but that doesn't make it very valuable. Like it's only valuable when you're able to use it in an exchange with other parties. I think what is just so important about this is that you are in control of that exchange, and that there's no intermediary like Meta or Facebook that is sitting there and kind of tapping the data exchange and building up this huge knowledge about you wherever you go, to Amazon, to Booking, to Target, like wherever you go, right? They're there and following you. So being able to put that intermediary out and get you in the driver's seat, that's the new and important part, as I see it.
You can add one thing.
I'm sorry, real quick. Could you stop sharing so we can see your pictures, because we don't need the slides anymore? And then the other thing is kind of comment. I think it's really important when we're talking about data to everybody embrace this as well. It's not just data produced by and about me, but it's data produced by and about my things, by my economic assets. So going back to the car example, there's Land Rover a few years ago did a study where they put a personal data store, a Kin-like system, in the bus hub of the car, plus a crypto token wallet, so that when the car was driving down the road and took pictures of a pothole, today that data is being sold by the car companies to cities. Tomorrow, the idea is, as my car is taking pictures of the potholes in the city, that data is owned and controlled by me because it was produced by an asset that I've fueled, maintained. I produce the data from that IoT device. Therefore, I should have the right to be able to sell it. So the model is, my car sees a pothole, that data gets sold to the city. The city likes it because they can optimize the ability to figure which potholes to figure out first. They pay today crypto into my car. That crypto then can be used for paying for local tolls and parking, while in and around the city, and then eventually possibly used to go buy a cup of coffee at a local shop. So those are the kinds of things that these are pieces are coming together. And again, I think tools like Tinderbox are really critical to it. Chuck, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to be a cynic for a moment and say, all the things we've talked about, personally in my career, I've worked on all of them, going back to the 90s at least. And in every instance, we put all the technology pieces on the table. We implement the full solution. And the industries that control these systems say, no, thank you. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way because we can control that. And so, I mean, I'll just throw out an example which is not my own, but a fellow by the name of Steve Gibson, that some people may recognize, developed a perfect user authentication mechanism for accessing the web called Squirrel, SQRL, and because you use QRL codes. Beautiful. Everyone who understands crypto and authentication says he did it right. No adoption. Even though the tools, the capability, everything is right there on the table, perfect implementation, nobody uses it. Yeah. So I think that there's got a meta question here we've got to come up with. We have a tremendous asymmetry between the users, the people whose information is being purloined by an industry that is very greedy and is making tons of money off of it. And why do we think we stand a chance of changing that? So
let me interrupt.
It's a problem that I think needs to be addressed up front before we can talk about
it's already
the
addressed. It's already addressed partially, because entire Euro Union with the wallet movement, it's one of the reaction that will change the game, right? And another game changer, it's actually the personal artificial intelligence together with the SSI, because these two parts really empower each other. And we have quite cool community talk about this. So I shared the link in the chat. So I guess that the artificial intelligence will help to change the game in this space.
Well, it's another technology in the same vein. Let me make one point, which is we don't even see consistency in the European Union or the countries in Europe. We see governments that are on one hand saying no one can't have end-to-end encryption without us being able to break into it, and we have other government agencies saying no, we got to have it. The Chinese are stealing all of our information. So again, we come up against this asymmetry problem. The people in power in governments, the people in power in industry have an asymmetric advantage over the rest of us, the 12 billion people that are or will soon be in this world. And I think that if we're not addressing that question, then we're not being realistic. And so I think it needs to be an upfront aspect of any business plan that wants to go in this area, is how are you going to address that asymmetric relationship? And if the answer is we're just going to get 10 million people, I'm not sure it's going to be a good answer.
No, but Chuck, here's a big part of it is there's a major global stick happening right now. By the end of 2026, they say roughly 75% of the world's population will fall under one or more of the hundreds of private, what's calling people-centric regulations like EIDAS 2.0, which was approved in February of 2024, which regulatorily mandates the implementation of these public-private good infrastructures and the rolling out of these systems. And in July 2023, Bhutan was the world's first country in the world to actually put into its constitution and legislation self-sovereign identity principles to give its citizens ownership and control of their data within a public-private good infrastructure like this. And then on the organizational side of it, not just for individuals, you've got the GLIFE legal entity identifier models, where today there are over 300 banking legislations that absolutely require the financial institutions to use these type of credentialing management systems and this type of technology that we're talking about. So it's a combination between the technology is finally here, the regulatory sticks are finally here, and like in Bhutan, you go to jail if you do these. And the cultural, I'm really fed up about this is finally here. So we're at a really interesting confluence.
I have to add to this, because the question is completely spot on, and as you said, in the 90s and in the early 2000s, so many people have already tried to solve these things, and how do we get 10 million people was your other question to hold their own data and so. And that is basically what we want to solve with Kin. Build a product where we don't talk about self-sovereign identity. We don't talk about all these things. We just build a product that can give you value from using it. So without you even knowing it, you get an identity wallet. You store all your data. And once you have 10 million people who are not only owning and controlling the data, but using and engaging with their data on a daily basis or weekly basis, then and only then is it possible for us to go to a business and say, dear Amazon, or who you will start with, say, would you mind making it possible for people to connect their data with verifiable credentials and zero knowledge proofs so you can give them a personalized experience without taking a copy of their data? And there's a difference between us coming and saying, well, we have 5 users who owns their data. Do you want to change your model? Or if we say, well, we have 50 million users and already have 500 other businesses doing this, would you mind doing it as well? And then they might say, well, yes. So it is, in order to solve the adoption phase, we need to do something that people care about, and they don't care about privacy or data storage or user control data either. I realized from hundreds of hours of conversation with normal everyday users on this that the only time you care about privacy and data ownership is when you're in your rational professional mind, when it's something work related or something like that, unless you're very geeky about it. What people care about when they come home is not to feel vulnerable. So just imagine, just as an example, if you walk into an office, like, you don't mind that Meta has access to your Facebook account. So why would they target you? But just imagine walking into your office and you see your colleague standing there with your phone in their hands, browsing through your messages and images and email. Then it's a different ballgame. So people need to experience how vulnerable they are before they care. And when we realized that, it was very clear that we cannot promote a personal AI with self-sovereign identity as being something for user control data and privacy and for self-sovereign identity. We need to promote it and build a product around it that solves all the problems. And this is then what we're tackling. If we get to survive long enough, we can go in and solve some of the bigger issues. It is correct what Michael says with the IDAS wallet infrastructure, that in the EU, so many countries will adopt identity wallets. However, we still don't know if Apple will negotiate their ways into EU and find a different protocol. Then we're still screwed in a way.
And they're actively doing that. I mean, their whole idea is get the Google Wallet and Apple Wallet integrated with the self-sovereign identity things, and then what happens with that interrupt? It gets messy.
And you saw now that Apple created a backdoor in the UK on their device, so they control their data, their device. So it's not good. It's really not good. So
Apple just denied
they didn't create a
doing anything.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They didn't
They
create
just
a
turned it off.
That was just the
That's all they
headline
did.
I saw 2 days ago. Sorry about that then.
Yeah. But they made it possible for, well, yeah, you can't turn on the encryption now, right, in the UK for your data. So now that's just how it is.
Not good.
Definitely a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we don't know who controls Apple 10 years from now, and well, power corrupts over time. So I think there is something on giving the control and ownership back to the individual, and it's so difficult, as you said, Chuck. I mean, it's impossible to do, and to have people care about these. So we need to do it kind of in a Trojan horse kind of way. So in 5 years from now, when they look up and say, oh, what about all my data? Well, take it easy. We got you. Like, you already have it. It's all good. So that needs to be the approach in some way. So yeah, that's
yeah, and there's a really fascinating thing happening again, where this is happening not just at an individual level, but at an organizational level too, because and that's called organizational identity. And then what ends up happening at the organizational level is the organization then can, what's called delegated authority. They can delegate to human and or non-human agents the ability to represent them, but those agents then need to present every time, here is my cryptographic authority, cryptographically signed and scannable authority that I'm able to act on your behalf. And so you're not your personal AI, your non-human agent, you will be delegating a SSI certificate that to your agent that you are controlling, and then can revoke at any point in time. So be really interesting to see how these agents start representing the various entities out there in the world, and the authority controls we give them through these credentials. And again, Mark Bernstein, I can't wait to hear your thoughts. We're kind of running out of time, and let's get to Kim before we leave. But I can't wait to hear your thoughts, and even on the forum, like, how do we start plugging our Tinderbox experience into these? And right now we can do it through any service like Kin that will open up an API to us via the run command. So at a simple point is we can do it today, but I'd like to really looking forward to explore this more. Kim.
Yeah, just awesome presentation. I had a couple of points here. I want to check out Bildung, a concept that was used in the Nordic countries. Talks about changing adoption level. It was definitely widely used, and I don't know if you're from that area, but Bildung would be something you want to check out for a solution for adoption. Also, number two, presentation was phenomenal. What was the actual application that you used? Was it like a Kumo presentation, or what was that? It was I'm in presentations or pitch.
Pitch.com.
Yeah, pitch.
Thank you.
It was pitch.
Yeah, I'll shut up. But thank you for your time. Great presentation.
Okay, I mean, as we talked about earlier, we could talk about this literally for days, years, hours. I mean, I personally, I can sit here all day and keep this going, but we are kind of running out of time. If anybody have any final thoughts, comments, questions, remarks, you guys want to give any final remarks? Like, how do people get a hold of you? How do they learn more?
Well, yes. So I shared some links just before. I can share them again. And an important thing for us is, and we hope you guys want to be our friends, because getting a tool like Kin out there is really a numbers game. We need to have the right advocates. We need to have people talking about it. Ethical solutions, as we're building, needs to get adoption, needs to get users on board. So we really hope that you want to read along on our blog, engage with us, suggest ideas. If you find interesting articles, share them with us. Tell people about Kin, download Kin, try it out. Like everything, we need all the help we can get. And being from Europe, trying to also get into the US market, it is difficult. So all the help we can get, we really need that. So yeah, I think that is. But please connect with us on LinkedIn, and yeah, and let's stay in touch for sure.
And actually, before I forget, I wanted to put two more comments into the chat. We were talking about too what will drive adoption for this, Chuck. There is an interview I did with the CEO of Hestia about 1.5 years ago, and I'll drop it in the chat, who had a program where they empowered local Uber drivers in Zurich, I believe, with a tool like Kin, with control over their data. And they were able to go to Uber and sue Uber for exponentially multiples of value, because where Uber was trying to settle this lawsuit for 5,000 euros, the Hestia model showed that data was actually worth 50,000 euros per driver. And so those kinds of things will be again, not just on a personal level but a commercial level, but as we go into the gig economy world, and we're using our different IoT assets, this is really going to fundamentally shift and change a lot. And it's going to happen within the next 3 to 5 years, because just the absolute exponential momentum and change that's shifting. So that's another one. And then the other concept is, just keep in mind, and I'll put another post on this idea, that we're really at an Amazonian-like meeting of the waters confluence, where you've got organizational identity, meaning organizational centric data, meaning people centric data. And the question is going to be, how many years will it take for these two rivers to come together? And will one subsume the other, or will there be some mixed model? And I'll share a link on a discussion I've had on that as well. So it's pretty crazy. Any other thoughts, comments, questions before we wrap it up?
I'll just make the comment. I've already downloaded from the iOS store the Kin app, asked for my name, and tell me a little bit about yourself. I have no idea how I'm going to use this going forward, but I'm very happy to do that and very appreciative of your comments today. So, well,
And can you just, I don't think, can you
Thanks.
talk about that? Like, how does like the Kin in that example, where would you suggest people get started? What are
that
they
is so we kind of themed this quarter and next quarter as being our week 1, and the first step is to make a product that works, and Kin is still in a beta version. We just put it out into the App Store, and it's only 2 weeks ago that we were at a level where we were comfortable saying that, okay, now it's very close to being really good. So over the next few months, that question that you just asked, Bill, should be answered straight away. What we will do is the journey when people notice Kin, when we tell stories about Kin in the real world, we will focus on problems that Kin can solve that are relatable and what you get out of it. And when you get in, we will try to inspire and show all the time and how to use Kin, get you onboarded in a good way, get you activated as a user. So that is a big task for us the next couple of months. So a fair question, very fair question. And thank you for downloading it.
okay, thank you.
Well, fabulous, everyone. Thank you very much. This is a fun day. And Chuck, we'll see you next week for your diagramming and Tinderbox meetup. So we get 2 speakers in a row. This is awesome. All right, everybody.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.
Nice to
This was
Bye.
fun. Thanks.